Here's something I do know. When I bought my first house up north with a well, with a septic tank, all the laws really cared about in buying that house was to check for bacteria in the well, gallons per minute, and recovery rate, meaning you probably have 3 gallons per minute, 5 gallons per minute, maybe a gallon and a half that the well can produce. And as you use that water, the water will go down, whether it's a dug well or whether it's a drilled well for that matter. How long does it take to recover? This is what real estate companies, lawyers want to see when it comes to buying a house with well, correct?
Actually, with how the laws are, I think one of the major things they're looking at is bacterial analysis before the client takes possession. As far as flow rate and things like that, this is why we're here. We want to talk about the importance of doing a flow rate sample, having an inspector or a water professional come in to test the water and to look at the well, have a well record report or a well driller do a well recovery test to make sure that there is enough water coming back into the well to satisfy the home. And then that's where we come in for water testing to ensure that the quality of water is there. And if not, then we can help suggest some solutions for that customer.
So the biggest thing that I'm hearing out of that is bacteria in the water. That's what they want to know.
Potability, making sure that the water is safe.
Okay, but I've heard stories that when people are selling their houses, they take a gallon of bleach and pour it down the well, and I've heard these stories, whether or not they're true or not. That will clean up the water coming in for a certain period of time.
It could. It would only clean up the water if the bacterial contamination was actually into the well itself or into the water lines. If the bacterial contamination is coming from the aquifer or the ground source, simply chlorinating the well is not going to solve the problem long term. That's going to be a short-term solution. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often, but if that's a short-term solution to try to get a test for the real estate, then so be it. Sometimes that becomes a temporary solution to rule out that it is just lines or well, and to rule back in that it is the aquifer, and then from there we can suggest a system to treat for bacteria.
Okay, so let's talk about that. The aquifer, when we do a drill into the ground, because we're doing a drilled well, we usually have a couple rows of aquifer. One may be 60 feet, the next one down 100, depending on your area. So we usually get to go through a couple of aquifers. What we're trying to do is find the one aquifer at my house that's going to give you the amount of gallons per minute that we would need. The great thing, even though I only came up with about 3.5 gallons per hour, is that
Gallons per minute.
It's per minute.
Per minute,
correct. So I only came up with about 3.5 gallons per minute on my property. I was afraid of that. I thought it was going to be an issue. It's not really an issue. Some people only get 1.5 gallons per minute. Also, there's 100 gallons per minute. They're drilled into it's a gusher. Like, what was the old show? The Green Acres. Which one was that? Really?
Like the Beverly Hillbillies?
Beverly Hillbillies.
Beverly Hillbillies.
There we go.
The old show is the Beverly Hillbillies, where they hit on their property an oil well and it gushed out. That's what we're all looking for when we're doing a drilled well. A dug well, it's what I used to have, is about 36 inches wide. It's a round cylinder, about 25, 30 feet in the ground. That acts as a cistern tank, or holding tanks for you to understand. It allows the water to actually seep into the well. That would be down beneath grade, and it keeps me with a cistern tank. The problem with that is I could have hard water at farms around me. I could have water runoff, and possibly this is where the contamination could be a problem. Thank God I've never had that problem. But I got to tell you the story. 2 weeks later, we find we're at about 800 TDS. I keep saying total dissolved salts. It's not. It's total dissolved solids. With this, it's now at a controllable level. It looks like my water's good. It looks like I have enough gallons per minute. I think we're going to cap it off at 4 gallons. In other words, put a restrictor on it so it'll never pass 4 gallons per minute and drain that drilled well down to the pump, which is not what we want to do. At 100 feet down is where the pump is. I've got a pretty good run cycle with recovery rate, so it should balance out. It's not like I'm going to run all the taps in the house at once. There's only 2 of us there, so it's going to work for what I need. So I'm feeling better now that Kinetico is going to come in. These two wonderful people are going to help me with what I need in my home, and I can reduce all that hardness. I can reduce all the TDSs in my home. But through all of this, what I'm learning is the importance for us to understand water. We just talked about what you have to do to buy a house that has a well, and we're not checking enough, are we? There's nothing in the system that says you got to check for radon gas. And there's nothing really in the system that says you really should look into the water. Everything I've learned right now is that anyone that wants to buy a house with well water really needs to call in the pros to test that water
100%.
before you buy the home. Because once you buy the home, you're left holding the bag.
It's your responsibility.
Yep.
And it's your bag, by the way.
And we talked about this this earlier place, and we're seeing a trend right now where that's becoming harder and harder for the consumer to do. We're seeing a trend in real estate where inspections are being waived over purchasing or over dollar figures, and to get the deal, they're waiving all conditions. They're waiving home inspections, which for a rural property on a well where there is quality in question, that does put a lot of responsibility on your shoulders once you own the place if there is something wrong.
Agreed. So you've been in water all your life. Your family has been in water. It's a